Hello, welcome back to Let's Talk Title with Emerald Coast Title Services. I'm president of ECTS and host Dion Moniz.
And I'm Ashley Bowen. I'm the director of operations here for Emerald Coast Title and a licensed title agent and an instructor for Florida Realtors now.
That's right, yay.
Yay.
Congrats.
Thank you.
Let's start wearing your badge to these podcasts.
I'm waiting for it to come in the mail.
Okay.
Thank you. I'll wear it to our next one.
All right. So today we're going to go over two new riders that came out in August. So by the time this drops, it'll probably be September. So within the last 4 weeks, as far as our listeners are concerned. But anyway, two great riders to now address buyer's broker compensation in the contract.
Buyer's broker compensation that has not been pre-negotiated.
Correct.
This is how you address it in the contract.
Yes.
That was the question that we got all the time. How are we going to address it? Do we write it in the contract? We've always been told not to write it in the contract. What do we do? Now we know. We have a writer for that.
Yeah, two writers for it, depending on the situation. And so these are new writers FF and GG. And so we'll go over FF first. Ashley, why don't you tell us a little bit about what FF covers?
Okay, so FF is putting the buyer's broker compensation in the contract, really. It says that the buyer's entered into a separate brokerage agreement with the buyer's broker, and at closing, the seller agrees to credit the buyer the sums described in that buyer-broker agreement to cover the cost of their buyer-broker.
Yep.
But it goes on. Like, I really like this one because it goes on so you can match it. But then it says that in the event that the credit described above exceeds the amount allowed by the buyer's lender for such contributions, then to the extent permitted by the buyer's lender, the balance of the credit will either be paid by the seller directly to the buyer's broker, or the credit will be reduced to the maximum amount that the buyer's lender will allow. So you have an option. You can either get the buyer's broker paid in full by the seller direct, or reduce the amount of the buyer broker fee to match the BBA.
Yep, and so that makes sure that everyone's in compliance and the lender's happy. So this is a situation where even if you know what seller side is paying, maybe you want to ask for more, you present this rider FF with the contract as your offer, and you're going to spell out how much you want to get paid from seller side. And it's got a percentage, it's got an option for a percentage, an option for a dollar amount, or an option for a percentage of the purchase price plus a dollar amount. So you've got all the options in there. So if you want to ask for 3% to be paid, etc., whatever, it goes into this rider FF that gets submitted with the contract. So now you don't have to worry about putting it under additional terms. It's already got everything worded for you, so you're not having to worry about practicing or trying to practice as a lawyer. And it covers the offset language that I really like. So it's really a great writer and answers the problem that everyone was having, or the question that everyone was having, beforehand, is how do I address the seller side paying compensation in the contract?
So if you do not have a seller to buyer's broker compensation agreement, or you don't like what it says, you can add this to the contract to get your commission attached to the contract.
Right. So let's go back to your first comment where you said these are used if the compensation is not pre-negotiated. So let's talk about when it is pre-negotiated. So how does that work? Those are the comp agreements. Mm-hmm. Let's go over those real quick.
Okay, so if the compensation has been pre-negotiated, then that means that the seller has already agreed to pay the buyer's broker a certain amount, either through the listing agreement or through one of these, either seller's broker to buyer's broker compensation agreement or the seller to buyer's broker compensation agreement. I think that if you have a listing agreement where there's a set amount that you are supposed to be paying to the buyer's broker, you should already have a compensation agreement in place.
Kind of pre-filled.
And so it's easier. So when someone calls you on your listing, you can send them that form and say, this is how much the seller's willing to pay. That's pre-negotiated.
Right.
But when you don't have it pre-negotiated, when the seller said, we're not paying anything, just give me an offer, then you would need to attach it to your offer some way. And these riders are the way to do that.
Yep, exactly. So plan A is you contact seller side. Seller side's going to pay 2%. You're good with that. Your buyer's good with that. It matches your BBA. You can just go ahead and countersign that comp agreement, and you have that to accompany the contract. And that's how you take care of the compensation between seller side and buyer side. Now, there's two comp agreements, broker to broker, as I like to say, to keep it shorter, or seller to broker. And so if section 10A of your listing agreement is checked, that means the seller side compensation is coming through the brokerage. So you're going to use your seller's broker to buyer's broker comp agreement. And if 10B or C on the listing agreement is checked, then you're going to use the seller to buyer's broker comp agreement. So just a quick summary for our listeners, since we're kind of tying all this together now. So that's plan A. It's pre-negotiated. Everyone's good with what's already being offered by the seller. You do the comp agreement. It's in conjunction with the contract. Then title company, we want to see the contract, the BBA, and the comp agreement, and we're good to go. But if it's not pre-negotiated, or if you don't like what seller's already agreed to pay, then you can submit it, this rider FF along with your offer for your buyer. And
FF lays out exactly what you want to get paid. Then they gave us, Florida Realtors gave us another rider, and that one is the rider GG.
Yep.
And that one just makes the contract contingent upon either broker to broker or seller to broker executing a compensation agreement with terms acceptable to the buyer within blank days.
The default is 3
of the effective date. So you do not have a pre-negotiated compensation agreement, but this rider says the offer is contingent on us determining one. So you're not telling them right then how much you want to get paid like you are with FF.
Right.
You're just saying we are going to come to an agreement, or we don't have to buy this property.
So this is like the plan C.
Yeah.
Plan A is the comp agreement. Plan B is rider FF. Plan C is GG, where you really don't know, but you're willing to try to negotiate it after it goes under contract. And if you can't within those 3 days, buyer can get out and the EMD is refunded. So some really great riders. Now, very important to keep this in mind. If the amount you're getting paid from seller side does not match your BBA, make sure you modify the BBA. If your BBA is 3% and you're only getting paid 2%, you got to modify it down. Or if you're going to get paid 4%, you got to modify up. Just make sure that all these forms now match each other.
And then Dion, earlier you said to me when we were discussing this, also you want, on the seller side, you want the listing agreement to match all of these compensation agreements and what is actually going to get paid out at closing. So if the seller decides that he's going to pay the buyer's broker something different than he said he was going to do in the listing agreement, then you should either modify the listing agreement or have this compensation agreement signed.
So let's give a quick example. So a quick example is if the listing agreement 10A is checked and it's 2% going through the brokerage to the buyer side, but buyer's agent submits an offer with rider FF at 3% and the seller accepts it. So now you've got a delta of 1% between what's in the listing agreement and what the seller has agreed to. So you can either handle that one of two ways. Option one is modify the listing agreement and change it to match. Option two is to have two comp agreements. How does that work?
Well, in that case, what your scenario was that your listing agreement was going to get paid 2% from broker to broker. And then Writer FF comes in saying that they want 3% total. So you would have a broker to broker comp at 2%, and then you would have an additional seller to broker comp at 1% to make the entire 3%.
Yeah, that's right. So you want the numbers to match. That way there's no inconsistency as to what's flowing through the brokerage versus what's flowing directly from seller. So again, option one is just modify the listing agreement to match whatever your seller's now agreed to pay. Or option two is to create a separate comp agreement between seller and buyer's broker to make up the difference. All right.
We got through that. We like these new writers.
They're great.
We are very happy that Florida Realtors came up with these because, like I said, that was the same question that we were getting all the time. Where do we put the commission? Can we put it in the contract? we're not supposed to put it in the contract. How do we know we're going to get paid?
Yeah.
So now we know.
Yeah, exactly. And as I've been telling or explaining in my classes since these have come out, it's okay to have both. You can have a signed comp agreement and use these riders. That's okay. But you can have one or the other and be okay as well, depending on the situation. So if any of this is totally confusing to you, please reach out to us. I've been a lawyer for a long time, and Ashley is now certified, so either one of us can answer your questions or explain a little bit better for you. So just reach out to us, ects.com or 850-650-0077, and we'll be happy to help you further. All right, well, until next time, we'll see you later. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.